Hi everybody, it's Lloyd De Jongh and Thunderous One on a Sunday night. Hope everybody is good. Welcome to the show, welcome to the channel. To all those who have come onto this channel on a regular basis, thank you. And to perhaps anybody that's new that's tuning in for the first time, welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy the show. This evening, both Lloyd and myself, we thought we'd have a little impromptu discussion on the contribution of Islam or from Islam for the past 1400 years on the world scene. So we're not going to be going into any one thing in particular for a great deal of time, but we are going to mention some things during the next hour that we can perhaps look at and look at the consistency or the inconsistency rather of Islam's contribution in comparison to the rest of the Western world, or in Islamic parlance, the land of the kuffar. So thank you, Lloyd. How are you?
Awesome. So, well, thank you, and thank you for that kind introduction, Thunderous. Yeah. So, hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. I know that Thaddeus is busy with Mal on his channel, so there's people watching that show. But for those of you who are here, welcome. Good to see you. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about Islam's contribution to the world. So, Thunderous and I will be showing different things and just discussing different areas that we think might be of interest. I've got a few things that I thought was relevant. Thunderous has his. So Thunderous, I'll let you kick off. Maybe you begin, and then I can bring up a few things as we go.
Sure. I think one thing that the Western world is constantly reminded of, certainly with the advent of social media, the growing populations that or communities rather, that we're finding in the lands of the kuffar, um, that certain sound bites or defaults or propaganda tools are used in order to project Islam as being in a positive light. One of the many things that they mention is Islam and science, and the advancement of science as a byproduct of Islam. Also, what we're going to look at is Islam's contribution via NGOs, charities, and such. And we'll also touch on things like what has Islam contributed when it has actually, via immigration, moved to other lands, the lands of the kuffar. Now, when I use the term kuffar, I'm using it in Islamic parlance in the context of non-Muslims. Now, anybody that understands anything about Islam will realize that kuffar is actually, or an infidel, which is another term they would use, is actually a negative pejorative. So it's not a nice word, it's actually an
Yeah.
insulting word, but it is the word that they use. So when I use that term, I'm using it in Islamic parlance.
No, understood. It is designed to demean us and to paint us as something like less than human, like the Untermensch.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't know where you wanted to start off this evening, Lloyd, but I think you said that you're going to mention some things about science. Shall we go there first?
Um, okay, let me bring up one thing. So actually, let me bring up one thing, just to get this out the way, something political. Then I'll jump into the science. Just a single article. I want to mention a few things. So Islam, as everyone knows, as I've told you all, is a political system. It is called a deen. Islam does not call itself a religion. Welcome, Dragon. Thank you for being here. Marek, XYZ, Josie Wales. Thank you all for being here. And let me see. There's one more on top. Dejan Dimitrijevic. Welcome. So Islam calls itself a deen, which is a political system very similar to what you would say is communism or fascism. Dodzor, welcome. So this is in Canada. A Muslim immigrant in Canada says it will be a Muslim majority nation, right in your face. Canadian Muslim admits reproducing more for demographic power and demands Sharia. John Kovacs, welcome. So understand, so this is a political issue, right? Islam is a political religion. In fact, it's a political system with a little bit of religion. The government will be changed, but Islamic law can never be changed. So understand, they do want to implement Sharia law and replace Western law. So it says here, a Muslim resident of Canada is seen talking to a reporter demanding Sharia law. The man demands replacement of constitutional law with Sharia law in Canada. They want this in the UK, they want this in Europe, they want this in America, they want this in Canada. The man candidly says that since homosexuality is not permitted in Islam, gays would be executed in accordance with the Sharia. When the reporter asks, do you want to see Sharia in Canada? The man says, at some point it will. Because we have families, we are making babies, you're not. Your population is going down the drain or down the slump. We can have a Muslim majority nation in Canada right in your face. Your thoughts on that?
Well, where do you want me to start on this one? For starters, one has to question at what point is this a breaking of the free speech? If a non-Muslim of any other particular religion or ideology was to speak like that, you'd wonder at what point in social media that that kind of language or rhetoric would be closed down. We don't find that with Islam. They seem to have that ability to voice their opinion and do it with impunity and immunity. As far as taking over the country is concerned, well, they're just going to breed. That's the way that they will overrun. I think this has been commented on before. I think before we came on the show, you and I were discussing the comments made by Colonel Gaddafi, and he basically said this kind of language. This kind of language has been used before. I've seen it myself when they've used terms like there will be a crescent over the White House, there will be a crescent over Buckingham Palace, and there will be a crescent over 10 Downing Street. Also, when you look at, say, maybe in America, the exception might be there because they have a strong Jewish party that gets involved in politics. But when you look at, say, Europe, England, and such, you find that the political system seems to be engineered to a certain extent in attracting the Islamic vote. So they pander to it because of perhaps, and in my opinion, maybe you have a different one, Lloyd, but because of voter apathy in Europe, the politicians have pandered themselves to an ideology that lends itself to politics. So you find that the political parties will, if you like, create a manifesto that is Islamically tolerant or Islamically appeasing or Islamically polite. This is why, for instance, you find blasphemy laws are they don't originate within Judaism or Christianity. They originate in Islam, and you find that those laws are being motivated by Islam as a form of appeasement.
Well,
What you're so gone?
yes or no, you have these de facto. I mean, the UK effectively has blasphemy laws, and I'm just bringing up my thumbnail. I mean, this is common. Sharia will dominate the world. Sharia
Yes.
controlled zone, and you get this. You get these benefits of rock throwing, burning things, burning cars, burning down neighborhoods, and of course, rape gangs. You know, these are some of the incredible benefits. Sharia is a political system. It's a political religion. It's a political system. So yeah, and also we've in the UK. I mean, the fact that they've failed to take action against these rape gangs that have been known for decades.
Yes, and it's not just one rape gang. Rochdale, Wrexham, Huddersfield, Leeds.
Yep.
It's it's an epidemic on epidemic proportions. The comment I wanted to make as well is that the audiences in other countries, for instance, say the Sikh community, the Hindu community, the Jewish community, they don't have a political office or a political ideology that wants to make itself manifest in the country that they are indigenous to, or even non-indigenous to, whereas the Islamic religion is. And then you find that they start motivating themselves inside political office. So you find things that you're mentioning, blasphemy laws changing as well, but also you find that they're very good at playing the race trump card. So one of the things that you brought up there was the sex grooming gangs, and one of the reasons why that they operated with impunity, and the local police who were fully well aware this was known, and I'm sure many people that are listening and that will be listening to the show will also realize that this wasn't something that was operating without the police intelligence being aware of. They knew, but they didn't want to make any arrests or infringe because they didn't want to make it look as though they were being Islamophobic. So it became a political, religious issue as to why they allowed thousands, thousands of girls to be systematically
Well, I
raped
mean, I
by
know there's
Muslims.
up to 1 million girls potentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you consider, say, blasphemy laws, I just want to make mention of this. I keep going on about it, but there is a point to it. The interesting thing about blasphemy laws is it stifles criticism. This isn't an outright attack on Islam, where you're saying something negative about Allah and Muhammad. This is about exposing Allah and Muhammad. Exposing Islam has now become hate speech. If you turn around and say something like, well, Muhammad raped a 9-year-old girl at the age of 54, that is considered hate speech. It is not considered criticism. It is not considered historical. And this is why the conversation it's served up as a technique to stifle criticism and conversation.
Saying anything in the Sharia, in Islamic law, to say anything that embarrasses Islam is considered a violation of the law. It is considered evil. So therefore, it is hate speech. It is hate against Islam, even if it is true, because Muslims are not allowed. Remember, Islam is supposed to be perfect, and therefore, if you demonstrate that there's something that's not perfect, you are violating the law.
Yes, and I think what people need to consider is when they look for, say, from Australia all the way to Canada, in the land of the kuffar, you'll find that no matter where Islam manifests itself in a community, you'll find schism, tension, friction, intolerance. Rather than, if you like, integrate, they isolate and assimilate amongst their own kind.
Yeah.
They don't interact. And this is one of the problems as well, because the irony is Islam runs away from countries where they consider some kind of persecution or intolerance. They run to the land of the kuffar, the land of the kuffar that provides free education, free healthcare, free dental care. You have opportunity via education to excel. You also have opportunity for employment to earn money. The very things they can't find in Islamic lands, they go and create communities in foreign countries, then replicate the hellhole that they're running from.
Yeah.
This is why in places like America, in Australia, in France, and in Germany and Sweden, one must remember, the rape capital of Europe, because of immigration, you now have things like no-go zones or ghetto areas, and the ghetto areas are predominantly Muslim. One of the techniques I've observed that they use is, unlike the Afro-Caribbean community that immigrated into Europe, they didn't socialize or deliberately by go into community areas and sort of like all of them condense themselves in one area. They're pretty much scattered about whatever town, city, or country that they move to. Whereas Muslims tend to congregate. If there's a Muslim community in one area, then all the other Muslims that come into the country
no,
want
this
to.
is what they're required to do. It's called a rabat. I want to move to a related issue that you mentioned and talked about stifling. Like XYZ mentioned that these blasphemy laws stifle criticism, but I want to show everyone that there's something else that they do. So this is a Wikipedia discussion. I want to bring this up first. So we're going to have to talk about a guy. This guy was best participant of the month. This was a user called Jagged85 on Wikipedia. He was contributor of the month for making the most edits to Wikipedia pages, adding content, doing things. User Jagged85. So let's have a look at Jagged85 a little bit. There we go, Jagged85. And then, of course, we talked. So his interest at the time was the history of inventions in the Islamic world, and he says here, okay, that some of the editing, especially that done by user Jagged85, is very biased and uses questionable sources to produce an Islamicist pseudo history. Okay, and he keeps adding this project's template to the talk pages. Okay, so fine. Let's have a couple of see what else they say about him. Jagged was selected as the best participant of the month. I nominate user Jagged85 due to his efforts in several articles. And this is Syed. This is a Muslim nominating a Muslim as the most important Wikipedia editor of the month, right? So Jagged85, so a very, very, very important guy. Let's learn a little bit more. So Syed, okay, and Amin's an Itak Allah for your nominations. Oh wow, so a bunch of Muslims nominated a Muslim called Jagged85 for this important role in Wikipedia. Let's have a look why. So let's have a look at this article called Islam, Science and the Problems at Wikipedia. At Wikipedia, Islam-related articles are often compromised by pro-Islamic editors. An example of this is where an editor with over 67,000 false edits was caught intentionally inserting false information into articles. Jagged85 had been editing for 5 years, and his inaccurate edits and articles have been reproduced all over the net by other websites which use Wikipedia as a source. So a summary of the above is that despite repeated requests from the editors, this editor has over several years, he would misrepresent the source by quoting material utterly out of context. Here's some examples. I'm going to drop this link to this article and the others in the chat. I'll do this in a moment, so you guys can have this. And then he would report that a source supports a claim that it simply does not, and sometimes explicitly does not, because people would not go and check. He claimed that a certain figure invented something or was the first to do something when the source simply says that they made or that they did that thing without any suggestion that they were the first to do so. He would report only one point from a source, even if it's a minor point, and ignore the contrary position it reports, even if that was the majority position. Rather than withdraw a claim, if it is pointed out that the source does not support the claim, he would find a source of any quality to use instead, even when that may be of much lower quality than the original source. He would invent claims, and he would cite sources connected with the issue, but which do not support these claims. This editor has also continued to use questionable, inappropriate, and unreliable sources. He would use exceptionally poor sources, and these are just a selection of the problematic edits of Jagged 85. Your thoughts there, Thunderous?
Well, this kind of mentality and logic is the same that I heard in the 80s and 90s, where Neil Armstrong became a Muslim because he heard the call to prayer while standing on the moon. That's that level of intelligence and editing.
Yeah. No, so this is what this guy did. So this guy made 67,000 fake edits. Now, this is one person, okay? They banned that username. Of course, Wikipedia is anonymous. You don't know who it is. He could be back at Wikipedia. And apparently, if you read further, many websites are quoting things falsely that they got from this guy or girl, that they've never gone back to change these articles because Wikipedia originally said that. People copied that, used it in their articles, and yet it's false information. So this lie has now spread all over the world.
Sorry, I just want to comment on what Josie Wales has said in the comment section. He says, "Without lies, Islam dies." And if your premise is a lie from the very onset, all you can ever do is lie to defend it. There's also another comment there by Jan Miller. Thank you, Jan, for your comment. They want to rule the world. That's true, and they're doing it on their own remit. Whereas if you look at the biblical narrative, we're putting our hope in the kingdom, Matthew 6:33 and Daniel 2:44, and there is a stark difference between the two. Shah PS says, sad more people are converting to Mohammedanism, especially the West. I would challenge that statement to say you are being told people are converting. There is no collation of figures to prove that to be the case.
The fact is that 95% or something of people of converts revert within 2 to 3 years. So they lose like something like 95% of these reverts within 2 or 3 years. In fact, Islam is really only growing through birth rate. And in fact, apparently even that is now declining. So even that's going backwards.
And also, is it Bilal Phillips and a few others?
The apostasy.
The apostasy tsunami.
Yeah. So everyone, just make a note. If one person can make 67,000 false edits on behalf of Islam to lie, to tell outright lies on Wikipedia, you can be assured there's probably an entire army of these people out there making edits. One guy, 67,000. Imagine there's 10 of them. That's over 500,000 edits. So understand this is an ongoing effort to lie blatantly all over the web.
So, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Selsuk Yilmaz reads, year ago as an ex-Muslim, I always dreamed to migrate to Canada, but after these new developments, my mind has totally changed, and I am looking for a different, as much as possible, Islam-free country. If one exists, the only one I can think of is probably Japan, or Bicef and Ireland.
Japan doesn't tolerate that very much, though. Japan is not very friendly to Muslims. Yeah, I've just posted the other article with Jagged 85 that I mentioned. This is from Wikipedia itself, with this discussion on Jagged 85, best user of the month, who turns out to be this complete liar and fabricator.
This is sort of Ahmadiyya and Faker Naik level of Islamic propaganda, where you have to do edits. Where this guy's edited that many times on Wikipedia, that's what Zakir Naik does on his own Peace channel, Peace TV.
Yeah, so do you want to go into something else that I just wanted to bring back?
Well, I just want to continue with the tactic of how Muslim communities are taken over. So they go into a little enclave, and the more Muslims go into, say, a particular area, what happens is the property values start going down because you're finding that the Muslim community is building up in that particular area because they're buying the houses that are for sale. So as the Islamic community is growing in that area, the indigenous population are having to move out because their behaviors or the local community's identity and infrastructure is changing to a more pro-Islamic one. For instance, you'll find that halal shops are being set up, clothing stores or Islamic stores, or the that kind of, if you like, image of the local community is replicated in the local commerce activity. So what happens is the house prices are losing value, and it's a deliberate tactic in order to allow the community in that area flourish with more Muslims. So it's quite a dirty, insidious tactic that they employ to grow these little enclaves. And one of the comments I read once was, in a minority, behave as lambs. If on an equal footing, behave as foxes, and when in a majority, behave like a wolf.
Wow, that's nasty.
But this is. Are we not seeing that everywhere this religion goes? We see the same things. We see the same schisms from Australia right through to Canada in the land of the kuffar.
Thank you, LTC. Thank you, Silva LTC. That's much appreciated. Yeah, well, there was a saying that I heard from a Muslim, which I think I wasn't supposed to know, but they say, "Do not let your enemy know he's your enemy."
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There is no the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, don't let your enemy know he's your enemy is probably the best quote in that kind of like land of quotes of enemies.
Yep. So I'll let you continue. You were.
Yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to only slightly touch on is when you consider the land of the kuffar that the Muslims are running to, is when you look on the world scene, for instance, you look at, say, Ahmed Didat in 1984 did a comment about Dawa in his he came visited UK to strengthen the Dawa movement in the United Kingdom, and I've got it on my YouTube channel. It's called Dawa in UK 1984. The interesting thing that Ahmadiyat comments on is that he says, with reference to Dawa, the whole Muslim Brotherhood and all its petrodollars could not compete even with Jehovah's Witnesses. Unless you live in an ivory tower, you'll know who they are. I thought it was quite a damning indictment that he mentioned as far as their own religion is concerned. But that got me to thinking, when you look at, say, the bigger picture of Islam and its petrodollars, and then you look at, say, the land of the kuffar, every benefit that the world seems to have at the moment, and I'm not talking about invention and science, that's probably a separate subject in itself, but what I'm talking about is things like international NGOs or international bodies that serve mankind. For instance, say an earthquake rescue team, that an international earthquake rescue team, which Muslim lands benefit from, um, Islam has nothing to do with. When you can consider charities that are designed to, say, go to foreign lands for food or water, you find that these things are all set up by the kuffar. They're not set up by Muslims, yet Muslim lands benefit from. So
Right.
it's an irony that 1400 years of Islam, if Islam is the truth, we can look at Islamic and controlled countries and we see no growth. We see Islamic lands as being the most impoverished, the most uneducated, the ones with the least rights for women.
I'm gonna talk about that. Yeah, definitely gonna bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, I'll leave that thought there then. But when you look at the whole social structure of the world, and its interactions in the way that it helps people out via NGOs and charities and such, we find that there is zero contribution from the Muslim world with all its petrodollars that in comparison to the West, and the Western world of the land of the kuffar
Well,
are producing these things not predicated on any religious motivation, but predicated on the sense of humanity. Um, I find that as a stark, an
well,
alarming
it should be
contrast.
noted. So sorry to interrupt. It should be noted though that people don't like Islam. It's not popular, which is why it doesn't gain traction. People actually don't like it. When they find out about it, they are quite revolted by it. So unfortunately, this is an image issue, which Islam finds extremely hard to overcome. Which is why they have to resort to the level of propaganda. I just want to say, Josie Wales, you're very welcome. And Silver LTC, I know because Josie's been with me a while, and Silver LTC also. I was going to, I just given Josie uh, admin status, and I was going to, so if you'd like to be admin, let me know, because you've been with the channel a while. So, and thank you again for the donation. Yeah. Also, I haven't been as busy on my channel as you know. I've been on Thaddeus's channel. I've been on Adam Seeker previously, and lately I've been on an atheist channel, Nuria Khan, where I've been doing my discussion on the Yemeni influence, the pagan influence on Islam. So I've been doing a lot of research in the background. So I've got some new material which I've written, which I need to edit and then start presenting on my channel again. But I've just had lots of demands, from outside sources, and then I'm also supposed to be with Al-Fadi and Jay soon. I mean, there's been delays around that, but I'll let you know as soon as that finally actually happens. Yeah. So yeah, and then also, so Silver said so that, like how Jesus is the Ar-Rahman and so is the Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. I've actually spoken about that. If you've watched my Yemeni discussion, you'll actually notice that this Rahman would seem to be Yahweh, and of course this whole thing, the Bismillah, seems to be derived somewhat from the God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. I'll try and bring up some information on that. Do you have anything you want to add? Then I'll go and look for some information while you speak, Thunderous.
Sure, yeah, I was Sharp, yes, says, and patrimony is used to violence. There's pattern, the richer Muslim countries, God attacks occurred around the world. That's an interesting point, because actually, just before we started the show, both Lloyd and myself were discussing a couple of historical characters from the Muslim world, one of them being Mohammed Mossadegh, and the other one being Colonel Gaddafi of Libya. Now, irrespective of what their political ideologies was, Mossadegh did want to nationalize the oil and then have the revenue from the oil to go back into the Iranian infrastructure in order to better the people's standing in society. So education, healthcare, the infrastructure of the countries would be improved. So there have been human beings that identify as Muslim that had good intentions historically. It's interesting you should raise that point there, because you would expect oil in Islamic parlance would be the product of Allah. They would say it is the will of Allah. So it's the will of Allah that the Saudi Arabian countries have these enormous vats of oil, that they have an amazing revenue that's accrued per annum, but you do not see that revenue, which logically belongs to the people, not any one particular person or any one family or any one body of people, should go back to the people that are living on the land, or to improve the infrastructure for the benefit of the Muslim world. You would think the Muslim world would use the revenue of the petrodollar in order to show as a flagship, this is blessings from Allah, and yet it doesn't.
Well,
that to
what's
me
interesting
is
is that the most effective, the two most effective polemics against Islam today, within the dialogue between Muslims and Christians, is one, the immorality of Muhammad, and two, the failure of Islamic countries versus that of Western countries. Just to deviate quickly, I want to bring up something that Silver LTC mentioned. Silver, let me see if you've had a follow-up comment. Okay, well, pity. So, okay, he had to go. But notice here, this is the Bismillah in Islam. Okay, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, and so on, right? So, this is put to work in the composition of the talismans, which is part of magic, admitted by the Sihr, or lawful magic. That the Bismillah, that the formula was inscribed upon Adam's thigh, it was upon the wing of the angel Gabriel, and on the seal of Solomon, and it was inscribed like a tattoo on the tongue of Jesus. This is the Islamic claim. And notice, Sihr is white magic, also called al-Uqda, known as charm or incantation, magical spell, and also known as sorcery and black magic. So Sihr is white magic, but it's black magic. And this is an incantation, a magical spell, that was also inscribed on the tongue of Jesus.
Oh my word.
Yeah. No. So this is, I mean, this is a serious concern for me, that this is what Islam claims, right? In terms of, yeah.
Which when now the irony is, as soon as you read that out, my thoughts were, Muslims love to quote Deuteronomy 18:18, but if you look at Deuteronomy 9 and 10, I think it's 9 and 10, where it talks about how God finds, or the God of the Hebrew scriptures, Yahweh, Jehovah, absolutely hates and finds it detestable that people would practice any of these things. Yet these are the very things from the very same chapter that they turn around and say quotes Muhammad or prophesies Muhammad coming, Deuteronomy 18:18. So if we look at Deuteronomy 9 and 10, I just need to find the scripture just to make
Let
sure
me
it is.
bring it up as well. So, so hold on, King James. I'll just bring up the one. Deuteronomy 18:18. You said.
No, Deuteronomy, first of all, about the magic is Deuteronomy 18, 9 to 13.
Okay. So I've got here 9 to 13. This is it. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. These things are an abomination unto the Lord.
There you go. And that's in the very same chapter Muslims will use when citing Deuteronomy 18:18. Can anybody see a pattern developing yet?
There's a handful of issues. In Chantra says all religions have an occult side, whether they recognize it or not, pagan or Abrahamic. That's a long discussion for another time. Understand, that's a very long. Islam has a very detailed occult esoteric side. It recognizes magic, it uses magic, and it is entirely magical. In fact, hold on, let me go, guys. I just want to bring up a couple of references. Let me go. So, where the Kuffar live is known as the Dar al Harb, known as enemy lands, the house of war, or the land of war, the Dar al Harb. Okay, you'll find that term referenced a number of times. Here they call it enemy lands. If it is not Muslim land, it is enemy land. It is the Dar al Harb, dealing an interest in enemy land. So India is an enemy land, the Dar al Harb, the house of war. Understand?
Which is why Islam is in a perpetual state of war until it becomes the religion that dominates the world.
Right. And then we mentioned science earlier. Science in Islam, I want to bring up a handful of references to science in Islam. For instance, there's the Ilm Amali, okay, from Ilm, the practical sciences, okay, fine and well. So let's have a look at Ilm. Let's have some additional looks at Ilm within Islam. So Ilm al-Arud, the science of metrics, okay, fine and well, that's all very nice. And then we get this here, Ilm al-Kalam, okay, that is the science of religion. So let's continue. Ilm al-Badi, rhetorical science. This is the beautification of literary style, the artifices, which is in other words means of lying, of the ornamentation and embellishment, lying to make speech sound better, making up stories, fabrication. Right, let's continue. Okay, where ilm is used heavily within Islam. So let's continue. Dara, the house of science, fine and well, but the whole of Islamic law of inheritance is called the ilm al-faraid. Okay, so you've got these references, and so in theological language, ilm was used in opposition to ilm, the accurate knowledge of legal decisions handed down from the Prophet and his companions. Okay, so understand fiqh and ilm mean the same thing. Fiqh is Islamic law. Ilm used to be Islamic law, the legal decision. So it is entirely theological. It is not science the way that we know it in the West. Islamic science primarily refers to theological understandings. Thunders?
No. I'm just listening to you there. This is some of the material. You see, Lloyd, your material is so deep. Sometimes even it's new to me, and I'm hearing it for the first time as well. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because you see, for me, the word ilm in Urdu parlance is knowledge.
Yes, it does refer to knowledge, but it's knowledge of legal decisions. It's knowledge of the Sharia, right? And I wanted to. Can I just jump again onto this topic? Because there was a number of things that... Oh, wait, hold on. Actually, you know what? I need to... This woman mentioned something about magic, so let me actually just go to that again as well. So we need to go to the ahruf. So just so that someone... Harf, okay? So Muslims talk about ahruf. They talk about ahruf and the qira'at, right? The different dialects of the Quran, right? So ahruf, plural, singular, harf, also known huruf, letter of the alphabet, correct. word, also correct. A Quranic reading or dialect, also correct. However, let's look at the main meaning of ahruf, of huruf within Islam. The science of huruf, the ilm al huruf, okay? Onomatomancy, a magical practice. It is based on the occult properties of the letters of the alphabet and of the divine and angelic names which they form. If we investigate this further, you will find that in volume 3, 595b, they discuss that Islamic letters are made up of earth letters, water letters, sun letters, moon letters, fire letters, and
and at what point is that not Zoroastrianism?
yeah, and that would be magic. So that would be definitely be magic. If I go to that, so volume 3, if I go to if I
Can
actually
I just comment?
sure,
Can I just comment quickly on something Josie Wales has commented on, just while it's in the presence of my mind?
sure,
I don't mean to interrupt your flow,
no,
though.
please go ahead.
It says Josie Wells comments, the idea of Islam calling itself an Abrahamic belief, but nowhere in the Islamic scripture or writings do they have the 10 commandments, the basis of the Abrahamic faith. They all talk about stones. Now, just bear this in mind, Josie, if you did a simple research on, by typing in any search engine you use, Adam to Muhammad genealogy, you will find that they have to put Abraham in there, but it's only 21 generations, right? There is no basis for any Muslim to turn around and say that the Islamic faith is anything to do with Abraham, because they've got no genealogy written down, because nobody had the presence of mind before Muhammad's birth to write down any genealogy in the first place, assuming that Arabs could write at that particular period of time, when you consider the most important man who ever walked the planet in Islamic parlance, Muhammad, could not read or write himself. So nobody would have had the presence of mind of writing down genealogy of Abraham via Ishmael, who incidentally was illegitimate, a bastard, to write that genealogy down. That's one thing. Second thing, the Bible has 73 generations from Adam to Jesus. Islam has 21 from Adam to Muhammad, and you have to account 540 years between Jesus and Muhammad. People can just work that out for themselves.
But also,
Sorry.
no, you're right. But also, Muhammad only asserted that he was part of the line of Abraham after the Jews rejected him. This, historically, he does not make this assertion prior. He does not. Only once the Jews tell him, you're kidding, right? Only then does he start to assert he's part of the line of Abraham. And so that came later. That was a later innovation by Muhammad, whoever Muhammad was, right? So huruf, ilmal, the science of letters. Onomatomancy, a magical practice. Okay, gave it the name Semiya, or supposedly white magic, occult properties of the letters of the alphabet. Arithmomancy, gematria, based on alchemy. The 28 letters of the Arabic alphabet are divided into 4 categories, each of 7 letters corresponding to 4 basic elements: air, fire, water, earth. The fire letters, the air letters, the water letters, the earth letters, and also lunar and solar letters. So the entire alphabet of the Arabs, and also thus the Quran, is basically a set of ritual incantations, or can be used as a set of ritual incantations.
That's a damning indictment there.
Yeah. No, I've spoken about that before, and then someone mentioned a few other things, but I was going to go to science. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Thunderous?
No. I mean, each one of these things that you and I are discussing, I mean, this is a very improvised show that we're doing tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably do a themed on any one of these for an hour, anything that we've mentioned anyway. So, let's move to science.
Yeah. So I'm gonna introduce this idea about this article, and if you guys have questions, please throw them out. We're just here to sort of explore and discuss Islam on a theme, right? But this is not something that we want to strictly work on. This is just a discussion, so that we can give our thoughts and perspectives on some of these, and deal with some of your questions. So now, okay. So in this article, why the Arabic world turned away from science. Islam is not known for its engagement in the modern scientific project. Let me just go back to that. Okay.
While you're just going back to that, can I just
Sure.
comment on Sharp? Yes, he says there some research students guess that Muhammad got knowledge of various religions of that time, mostly now extinct, from Silk Road trade routes. Absolutely, he was a traveling salesman. What you mentioned there is bang on point.
No, this is very true. Knowledge traveled through the trade routes. So that was definitely the fact. Okay, so supposedly Islam is heir to this legendary golden age. but that can be questioned, right? Of course, there's lots of propaganda, just like George Bush left us with the horrific "Islam is a religion of peace" statement. You know that will live on in infamy. This is Barack Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, who's got three Islamic names: Barack, Hussein, and Obama. All three of these are Muslim names, but I guess he's not a Muslim. It was Islam that carried the light of learning through so many centuries, paving the way for Europe's Renaissance and Enlightenment. It was innovation in Muslim communities that developed the order of algebra, not true, our magnetic compass and tools of navigation, our mastery of pens and printing, our understanding of how disease spreads and how it can be healed. Just on this point, the voyages of discovery were required because the land route, Marco Polo had taken the land route. The Turks cut that off. The Muslims cut that off. They would rob, just like Muhammad was a caravan robber, they would do the very same. The Europeans were forced to find sea routes. That's why they went south around Africa and then east, and that's why Columbus went west to try to find India by going through America, right? Discovering much of South America and of course and so on, right? So because Islam had cut off access, notice paper, right? Papyrus from Egypt. Islam had cut that off, right? They plunged Europe into a 200-year recession because they'd cut off trade. They'd cut off access to goods. So Europe was forced to invent the printing press because they couldn't get hold of papyrus, right? So they were forced to find alternatives. So they created all of these issues. So no, algebra, this comes from India, right? So, and also a lot of these Muslims would invade areas, right? And then they would simply take what they found, the learning that they found, and claim it as theirs. And many of these Arabs who invented certain things were Christians or Jews, just with Arab names, because there were Arab Christians and Arab Jews. So,
Can I just comment on that as well? Just comment that it's worth noting that when Islam invaded certain lands, if those, if like those learning points were, or sciences, or had any educational value, they would keep them. If it was in line with Islam, but if it went against Islam, they would burn them. So we don't know whether we've actually lost as a result of the Islamic purge of education in those lands that they went in and conquered. We just know what remained, and most of what remained is exactly what you're mentioning now, is the product of other people's learning and research.
yeah. So no, you're right. So exactly. So notice I'm just going to go through a few passages in this article. The disparity between the intellectual achievements of the Middle East then and now, particularly relative to the rest of the world, is staggering, right? So for many centuries, Islam was supposed to be in the forefront of human achievement, right? However, let's have a look. Today, the spirit of science in the Muslim world is as dry as the desert. Pakistani physicist Pervez Amirali Khudboy laid out the grim statistics in a 2007 Physics Today article. Muslim countries have 9 scientists, engineers, and technicians per 1,000 people, compared with an average in the world of 41. Okay, in these nations there are approximately 1,800 universities, but only 312 of those universities have scholars who have published journal articles. So basically 1/6 of the Islamic universities have scholars in them who have actually published articles in journals. Of the 50 most published of these universities, 26 are in Turkey, 9 in Iran, 3 in Malaysia, Egypt, Pakistan has 2, and Uganda, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Kuwait, Jordan, Azerbaijan each have 1. So there are roughly 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, but only 2 scientists from Muslim countries have won Nobel Prizes. In science, one for physics in 1979, the other for chemistry in 1999. 46 Muslim countries combined contribute just 1% of the world's scientific literature. Spain and India each contribute more of the world's scientific literature than all the Islamic countries in the world together. That's like 50 countries. Spain and India contribute more. Go on, Thunderous.
No, I was just humming in agreement.
Yeah. So Spain is hardly an intellectual superpower, but it translates more books in a single year than the entire Arab world has in the past 1,000 years. So, though there are talented scientists of Muslim origin working productively in the West, Nobel laureate physicist Steven Weinberg has observed, for 40 years I've not seen a single paper by a physicist or astronomer working in a Muslim country that was worth reading. So Arabs comprise 5% of the world's population, but publish only 1.1% of its books, according to the UN Arab Human Development Report. Between 1980 and 2000, Korea granted 16,328 patents, while 9 Arab countries, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, granted a combined total of only 370, many of them registered by foreigners. A 1989 study found that in 1 year the United States published 10,481 scientific papers that were cited frequently, while the entire Arab world published only 4.
Can I just comment? So somebody never return as a horse has commented, yet we have respected scientists such as Neil deGrasse Tyson spreading the falsely inflated claims of the great scientific achievements of Islam. The problem you have there with people like Neil deGrasse Tyson is they're just repeaters. He's a physicist. He's not a historian. He's not researched anything. He is just like a Muslim scholar for $1 or any Westerner that comments on Islam. He's a repeater. He's not presenting anything new. So his ignorance in history and Islamic contribution is a damning indictment of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he should just stay with being a physicist and not comment on any other subject.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, sadly, So now I'll finish off shortly. So I mean, just the fact that you've got the U.S. with almost 11,000 scientific papers regularly cited, right? And in the entire Arab world, we have 4 whole papers. 4. So when Nature magazine published a sketch of science in the Arab world in 2002, its report identified only 3 scientific areas in which Islamic countries excel: desalination, falconry, and camel reproduction. That really helps a lot. We all need to improve camel reproduction. So
certainly if you want to drink camel urine as Mohammed prescribed, because I know one shop in Saudi Arabia ran out of camel urine and the guy had to use his own urine to fill up the bottles, but he got arrested.
That's pretty scary. I know. So
yeah, that's a true story, everybody, and I'm not taking the piss.
That is true. So caution must be noted about both parts of the term Arabic and science. First, because the scientists were not all Arab Muslims. Indeed, most of the greatest thinkers of the era were not ethnically Arab. This is not surprising, considering that for several centuries throughout the Middle East, Muslims were a minority, a trend that only began to change at the end of the 10th century. The second caution about Arabic science is that it was not science as we are familiar with it today. Pre-modern science, while not blind to utility, sought knowledge primarily in order to understand philosophical questions concerned with meaning, being, the good, religion, and so on. Modern science, by contrast, grew out of a revolution in thought that reoriented politics around individual comfort through the mastery of nature. Whatever modern science owes to Arabic science, the intellectual activity of the medieval Islamic world was not of the same kind as the European scientific revolution, which came after a radical break from ancient natural philosophy. Don't forget, Islam is still practicing magic. Its science is sciences of magic, sciences of rhetoric, which is propaganda. Even though we use the term science for convenience, it is important to remember this word was not coined until the 19th century. The closest word in Arabic is ilm, which means knowledge, and it is not necessarily knowledge of the natural world. It is knowledge of things like magic, knowledge of philosophy, knowledge of religion, knowledge of the law. Thunderous, over to you.
Well, the first thing that I want to say is that when you consider the achievements in science that have come from, say, the non-Muslim world, you don't find Judaism or Christianity or Hinduism or atheism claiming it's because of their Christianity, Judaism, atheism, or Hinduism that has produced the works or the papers or the peer review material that they've come up with, or scientific inventions or the changings in the scientific world as a product of their faith system. They just happen to be of that religious system. Yet Islam seems to, when it portrays any advancement, what little advancement that we have, when it does produce science, it lends itself or uses a dialogue to infer that it's because of the Quran and the Hadith that science has made advancement in the Western world, or even in the Islamic world, that the science that we have today, or the understandings we have today, have been predicated on the text of the Quran and the Hadith, when in reality, all it is, at best, is that person happened to be a Muslim who made that achievement or that discovery or that finding. That's all, nothing more than that. But because of the use of rhetorical devices, the use of propaganda and sophistry, they tend to present it as if to suggest It's Islam that's done all this achievement. It hasn't. Anymore, as an example, than say somebody like Dr. James Tour, who is probably one of the world's leaders in abiogenesis, which is chemistry before it becomes a cell, or biology. He would not say that it's because of Christianity he's a world leader in that area. Yet he is a world leader in that area, but he doesn't predicate it on Christianity. He predicates it on factual, actual science, nothing more.
Yeah, I've dropped this in the comments, guys. I've dropped this in the chat. So we have a look here. How Islamic inventors did not change the world. Now they do reference here this book by a book by a guy called Paul Vallely, How Islamic Inventors Changed the World, who seems to have been making claims that were, let's say, not shown to be factually accurate, right? And so here, these are claims that Muslims make and that this guy made in his book. So who knows? Maybe he took a little bit of money under the table to write it for them, but coffee, vision, chess, flying, bathing, distillation, the crankshaft, quilting, architecture, instruments, the windmill, inoculation, the fountain pen, surgical techniques. There's a whole bunch of them. So someone asked about surgery. Shah asked about surgical instruments, right? And I went to the section on surgical instruments, and this is the Islamic claim, blah, blah, blah. But of course, we know that the whole surgical thing goes way back, well before Islam. But then, of course, everybody was a Muslim, right? Even when Islam didn't exist. Muhammad was the first Muslim, except Adam was the first Muslim, except Noah was the first Muslim, except Abraham was the first Muslim, except Khadija was the first Muslim.
Don't forget Jesus. Jesus was a Muslim.
Jesus was a Muslim.
Muslim.
Yeah, Jesus was a Muslim. And Jesus had the Bismillah tattooed on his tongue. So, yeah. So understand, these are the claims Islam will have to make for itself. So, yeah. Back to you, Thunder.
I was just going to say, when you consider that some of the greatest advances that we've seen in society that have benefited society, when you think of, say, in the world of biology or chemistry or pharmaceutical engineering, agriculture, most of it you can probably see its movement or advancement from the Industrial Revolution. Yet Islam has contributed nothing, anything. Even if it was just to say the past 200 years, 300 years, that has benefited mankind in any way, in the way of engineering, in archaeology, in architecture, nothing. There's no contribution. Yet it claims to have had all this impact on society during, was it the 7th century and the 12th century, or was it the 9th century and the 12th century, or the 13th century? I forget the time period, but the golden age of Islam, which was run for about 300 or 400 years, then it suddenly died. Now, one would think, why wouldn't Islam or Muslims need to go back to a particular period of history several hundred years ago to try and claim that it's Islam that's moved society forward? Surely, if Islam is the truth, it should still continue to be doing that now. It should be doing it more so now that there are more humans on the planet. The way that human beings communicate with each other is a lot better than is the best it's ever been before with social media. We have a lot more sciences and a lot more scientific disciplines now that human being understanding of their environment, in the way that we live, how we live in the universe that we're living in, has significantly moved forward. Yet Islam has stayed back exactly where it was from its inception. It has not advanced any further forward. Yet the kuffar, the idolater, the infidel, has excelled. Now, looking at it, if you had to make a judgment just on this evidence alone as to which one has, now I'm not going to suggest for the slightest that the land of the kuffar has the backing of God behind it, but if you was to judge which one doesn't have God backing it, you would have to say Islam has nothing behind it backing it at all.
Yeah. No, I want to make a note. Someone spoke of Jewish contributions, and so Jews are approximately 0.2%, 0.25% of the world population. They are 22% of Nobel Prize winners. They are 47% of world chess champions. They are 51% winners of the Oscars for Best Score and Best Song. And they are 30% of the best thinkers of the 20th century. They are 40% of eminent psychologists. And of course, we know they're very successful in business, finance, education, medicine, government, Hollywood, cosmetics, literature, law, philosophy, charity, etc. So how is it that something like 16 million Jews total can this much outdo, outthink, outachieve 1.6 billion Muslims who are following the perfect religion.
And the interesting thing is, if you look at those people that have made these achievements from that significantly small number, they would not predicate their success on the Bible or, say, the Talmud, whatever their Jewish scripture is. They would not say, this is because of why I am as smart or we are as smart as we are. You never hear that kind of rhetoric or promotion. And the other interesting thing is, if you was just to look at the disposition of the natural disposition of a Jew, which are voracious readers, accumulators of information, hence why they probably have the statistics in advancement over other people that they do. You can then understand at the time of Muhammad, they would have been studious people back then, just as they are now, and they would have seen Muhammad for the charlatan that he is. And by rejecting him in the way that he did, because they're educated people and he wasn't, you could then see why his vitriol and hatred was aimed specifically at them, because they were exposing him every time.
You know what Cogito just made up? He just says, Islam, the greatest physicist of all time was Muslim. His name was Ahmed Einstein. Just look it up. Sorry, man, that was hysterical. Oh my god, that is funny. Ahmed Einstein. You know what? It's probably somewhere on the internet. So yeah, guys. I mean, this article, this might be worth looking at. Might be worth looking through. I've dropped it in the chat. I'll make it. Actually, I should make a comment with this later. But yeah, you just realize that there's just so it's what right now Sweden was burning for weeks, right? Cars burned, police stations bombed, women raped. I mean, this is the
Right.
contribution from Islam to the West. I mean, Germans are
That is,
fleeing to Uruguay of all places to get away from Islamic immigration.
yeah. See, that in itself, Islamic immigration is a show in itself, in its own right. I think everything that we've touched on tonight is a show in its own right. When you start breaking down the impact that Islam's had in those various discussions that we could possibly have in the future.
Yeah, Muhammad was the first in space on his donkey. Islam was the first to break the sound barrier, guy on a donkey. Um,
And I've got it on my channel where one woman presents. Obviously, she was paid to be a presenter. Where they talk about Islam was the first source of time travel, because they had to get out of the situation where Muhammad got on the Burak and got to Jerusalem, where the temple was, and then flew to the seventh heaven. So they had to get themselves a way around it, and they made a mathematical equation of how the speeding donkey flew so fast it actually went back in time. So it went back in time to when the temple was actually there in Jerusalem, and then that's when he went to heaven. That's actually on my channel.
oh my god, that's horrible. Yeah, because he tied his donkey up at the mosque before it was even there, years before it was even built. So yeah, just incredible.
Wow.
Insanity, insanity. Yeah. So I mean, these are the things that I wanted to discuss. Do you have anything else that you want to raise?
No, no, no. That's it. I think I'm pretty much all blown out at the moment.
Yeah, guys. So another tip: a king called Tupu Sultan used rocket weapons in war against Western troops. Is it, dude? I don't necessarily know every last little detail. I mean, I trust you know how Google works. You know, all of these things can be researched. I mean, so yeah, angels, whatever. So yeah, guys. Now we do know, as you know, be careful with Wikipedia because their user of the month, Jagged85, as you know, was incredibly dishonest and very, very prolific in making false edits, literally lying his way through Wikipedia. And in fact, if you read through the article, I think they state that many of those lies are probably still there. They haven't found all of them. They haven't found all the
Mm.
edits he's made. And a lot of people are quoting things that this guy put in Wikipedia that are completely false. So there's an entire propaganda campaign to make Islam look far better using just outright lying. So bear that in mind when you use Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's an embarrassing thing to happen when people do research. They go to Wikipedia and quote something, only to find that what they've quoted, they've not researched the quote themselves. They're using other sources to corroborate what's being said, which is what people should do rather than just find the first source that they find to quote something. Just do a little bit more research, and then you won't look so foolish. Because there is a scripture, Proverbs 18:13, which reads, "He who answers a matter before he hears the facts is a shame and humiliation to him. And that's a proverb. It's the one that I stand by. So I tend to do a little bit more research than I should do. I know Lloyd certainly does. That's why you keep coming to Lloyd, and I certainly learn things from Lloyd myself. But research is valid, and you'll notice that, which I'm certainly appreciative and grateful for, Lloyd very rarely, if ever, only as a last resort uses Wikipedia. Brill is quotes, source material and such is from other external sources, which makes it irrefutable. So Lloyd's a good example in this area.
Well, thank you. So yeah, Thunders, I'll let you end off. Yeah, anything you want to raise, or things you want to think about for talking about next time, ideas that this has brought up. So I'll let you end off.
Well, I want to thank everybody for this was an impromptu discussion that we decided to have on Islam's contributions to the world. Every part of what we discussed tonight could be broken down and have its own show. So in the show notes, we'll put this out to you. Can you put some comments in the comments section about what discussions you would like Lloyd and myself to have in the future, and the particular themes and the particular subjects? So give us time so we can do a little bit of research on those points, and then we'll certainly dedicate maybe 2 or 3 or 4 shows, whatever the material is that in the chat. We'll do that for you, and hopefully we'll learn something from those suggestions, and Lloyd and myself can have another interaction of encouragement. So I want to thank Lloyd as well for inviting me on the show this evening. I want to thank the audience for being a part of it, and I want to thank you, Lloyd, as well, for always your kindness in inviting me onto your channel.
No, thank you. No, that's actually, it's always interesting speaking with you. And someone says riots in Sweden. Does that count as a contribution?
Well, yes, it is a contribution, but not, yeah, it's not the one that you're thinking or the one that you want, but it is. It's contributing as an advertisement of as to how poor Islam is.
Yeah, happy Easter, everyone. So for those who are Eastern Orthodox, Sachar, welcome. Arnold, welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, here in Poland, there's lots of Ukrainians, and they are celebrating their Easter today. We saw them today. By the way, there's a couple of things that I'm working on, historical things. The earliest evidence of Christianity in Arabia. This is a rock inscription. This dates to the 4th century, and it has the name of Jesus on it. And you might be interested to know it's in a language called Safaitic, and the name of Jesus on this rock, of all things, happens to be Isa. So that might be something that's of interest to you. And then also, there's another article that I'm working on that I want to present this week. It's about the Philistines, and the evidence is now in. The DNA evidence is now, it's confirmed. The Philistines were from Europe. They are from Greece. They're from the island of Crete. So the Philistines are not Arabs. They're not Muslims. They were from Greece. This is based on the DNA evidence. The archaeological and the DNA evidence confirms. So,
can I just ask a question? Because that's new to me. I'm hearing that for the first time. Will that be the same Philistines that constantly were a thorn in King David's side?
Yes, that would be the Philistines, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Palestinians, the Falastini. I mean, they don't even have a P in their Arabic language. They say Falastini. They don't say Philistines. So yeah, the bones don't lie. The Philistines had European ancestry. These were Europeans. So yeah. So guys, I'll cover this. I'll do this week. I'll record these 2 this week discussing this. So yeah, that's it for me. So thank you, Thunderous, and we'll be back in the week or next week, right? Same time ish. Guys, thank you very much. So yeah, you guys, hopefully this was helpful to you. I will post some things in the comments later. And we'll see you guys in the week. Take care. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
And